Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pekoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, did you enjoy the number of kids graphic on tonight's broadcast?
It was a little fortuitous. Technically, that was pre-broadcast, but also why?
I don't know that having children equals success, but if it was, if it had anything to do with success, then Philip Rivers is a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Him and Antonio Cromartie, right?
Yes. Yep. Cromartie, I think Cromartie still has more.
I think Cromartie wins.
Cromartie was just born to do this, so it's hard to say anything about Cromartie there. But yeah, the fact that they had that graphic up, I didn't see it initially on the broadcast. I ended up seeing it on Twitter. I was like, wait, this wasn't Photoshopped. This was something that they actually put on TV.
Well, it was they had a comedian select who's going to win the game, and so that was part of the bit. So It was intended to be nonsense.
Okay,
Right, yeah.
Here I thought that Fox was doing a real breakdown of like they might as well have that does play a part. You have 9 kids. Are you really sleeping? Are you really doing anything at that point?
That was the argument, that he's elite because he's able to do all of this without getting any sleep.
Wow. Without seeing it, I was able to pick apart exactly how they were going to do that. I don't think that bodes well for whatever they were trying to do if I was able to guess that without even doing a damn thing. And on that note, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are doing well. We have a Bears game, a primetime Bears game to preview, which we'll be doing here in just a moment. But again, want to thank you guys so much for listening. If you enjoy the show and would like to donate to the show, you can do so and support the show in one of 2 different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode, or you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well. If you go the Patreon route, if you go to patreon.com/NorseCode, you can access the bonus material, the bonus episodes that we post about once a week. So if you're interested in more Arif and James, go ahead and head over there and check out the bonus episodes that we put out. So, if you are interested in such things, you can do that, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com for all of your Norse Code merchandise needs over in the collections area. There have been a few pictures that have come in over social media of people receiving their stuff. I believe I received my shirt and my cup today, and I
received my mug, my notebook, and my sticker in 2 separate shipments over the course of the last 2 days. So I'm pretty happy with it. Haven't broken in the mug yet, but I'm pretty excited about all of it.
I did break out the mug today. It is just as colorful and anti-turkey as I could have imagined.
It's fantastic, yeah.
It's good to have, it's good to be able to express yourself and your turkey takes in cup form. This is next level Norse Code now. So, again, if you are interested in such things, if you'd like a t-shirt or some other object for this fantastic design that was made by Drawplay Dave, you can do so over at norsecode.threadless.com. I can say the shirts look good. I can also say that the other things that have come in do look good. And even the hoodies, which I had a couple of questions about, did look good on social media today. So if you are interested, again, it is threadless.norsecode.com. But again, if you'd like bonus material, it's just over at the Patreon. All right, but for right now, we are going to go to an interview that Arif taped earlier today with Lauren Cox. He has been on the show a couple of different times over the last few years, and we mainly keep him on because of the world's greatest Twitter handle. So here's an interview with Lauren Cox with the Twitter handle CoxSports1.
All right, I'm here with probably our only consistent guest, Lauren. That's not true, but whenever I talk about the Bears, I always bring on Lauren Cox. At CoxSports1, we've talked many times about how great an @ that is. I hope he never changes it. You can find him on the Locked On Bears podcast. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing well, and I've thought many times about changing my Twitter at, but it's your faith and resilience that keeps me going strong.
Yeah, I feel like it's your twice yearly appearance that keeps you at that Twitter at, because so many people are like changing it to their real names and stuff, and I've done that, but you don't need to become me. You don't need to be as cowardly as I've become.
Well,
So,
at Lauren Cox is this like 40-year-old woman in Arizona whose account is locked and will never respond to my tweets. I'm very frustrated.
oh wow, okay, yeah, that's brutal, man. How much would you pay at Lauren Cox for at Lauren Cox?
I think I could go as high as, boy, I was going to say $50, and then I felt so much shame even going that high. So I'd $20. I'd pay $20 for my Twitter handle.
It's shame. I think $50 is fine. I think that makes sense.
It's Twitter,
I,
man.
I am terminally online, so I might overvalue these things.
That's what my shame was for being too online. That was the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe don't take my advice on this one. Okay, yeah. So we'll talk about the Bears. Let's talk about the defense first. No one wants to talk about that offense. Normally on the show we talk about the offense first. I think once this year we've talked about the defense first. Let's make it two. Um, so I think it makes sense to talk about this pass rush. I feel like this pass rush could be better, but isn't. You still have a top 3 edge defender in Khalil Mack. You've got some pretty good pass rush from Akeem Hicks, surprising penetration from nose tackles. But I feel like there's something kind of missing from this pass rush. Is that wrong, or should they be getting more pressure? Am I kind of over evaluating here?
Well, what's missing is Robert Quinn, who is in fact not missing.
Premier run defender Robert Quinn.
It's like they tried to replace Leonard Floyd by spending $70 million on Robert Quinn and got Leonard Floyd without the coverage. Like it's been maybe the worst free agent signing, one of the worst free agent signings in the NFL at this point, and perhaps the worst the Bears have made, which is saying a lot when they have Jimmy Graham on offense, paying quite a bit for a not high quality tight end. But no, so weirdly enough, the pass rush has been good enough, if not very good, over the last couple of weeks because the other guys, the guys who aren't the household names, have been really playing at a high level, like a surprisingly high level. Like Mario Edwards Jr., the former second-round pick out of Florida State a couple of years, probably half a decade ago now, with the Raiders and Giants and Saints, he's bounced around. All of a sudden, he comes to Chicago, and it's amazing what can do for your career when you've got Akeem Hicks and Khalil Mack pass rushing next to you. So you just get one-on-ones, and if you just work hard, you're going to get to the quarterback. So like Mario Edwards has been getting pressured fairly consistently. Brent Urban, the former Tennessee Titans defensive lineman, these like journeyman guys that just kind of bounce around have come to Chicago and been key rotational pieces in that defensive line. So like for the most part, this pass rush has done their job, but they could be a truly great pass rush if Robert Quinn could rediscover what made Robert Quinn so good. And I know he's had a lot of success in the past against the Vikings.
The last time, so he was actually pretty good in Dallas. I shouldn't be that harsh, but how many years has Robert Quinn been good versus how many years has he not been good?
Well, this is why you sort of raise an eyebrow when the Bears give him a 5-year contract. Because, last year in Dallas, he had 11.5 sacks, and then, like, a decade ago in St. Louis, he had a 19-sack year. I mean, he's had double-digit sacks a handful of times in his career, and in between, it's been a lot of disappointment. So you don't necessarily expect the guy at, I think, 30, almost 31 now to keep that up for a long term. So, yeah, a little bit of questionable in there, but it kind of speaks to this Bears philosophy of, like, they were trying to go all in on this season, and it's very quickly derailed.
Yeah, I feel like I know what that looks like. So one member of the Bears defensive line that has been underrated for quite a while, but doesn't seem like he'll be available this week, Roy Robertson Harris. Is he on IR? Is he going? Because I know he's undergoing surgery.
It's supposed to be season ending. I don't think they have formally placed him on injured reserve yet, but I'm actually not 100% positive. But regardless, you won't see him again for the rest of the year.
Okay, and you think that maybe Mari Edwards, Brent Urban, they'll be able to kind of fill in the gap, so to speak?
Yeah, Robertson Harris has been quieter this year. He's kind of like the Anthony Miller of the defense, where it's like every year it's like this is going to be Roy Robertson Harris's breakout year, and he's been fine. He's just been an average defensive lineman, and they've gotten maybe even above average play from guys like Urban and Mario Edwards consistently enough.
Okay. And so when you take a look at this Vikings offensive line, which has played a little bit better over the past 2 weeks, and you see Khalil Mack going up against, he lines up on either side, right? So he'll be going against Brian O'Neill and Riley Reif, both of whom are having pretty good years. Reif probably having his best year as a pass protector. Robert Quinn, on the other side of that, I guess. And Akeem Hicks going up against an interior where Ezra Cleveland is playing maybe a little bit better than you normally get, and Garrett Bradbury is playing a little bit better than he was last year. How do you see this matchup going defensive line to offensive line?
I have a lot of confidence in this Bears defensive line in particular, that they've been able to, it's not even anything they're doing like super special or fancy. They've just been able to consistently get home rushing 4, and it's allowed the
they haven't blitzed a lot this year despite Pagano being there.
Yeah, Pagano has not gone heavy on the blitz at all. In fact, to the point where Bears fans have been even a little bit disappointed that he hasn't been more aggressive in some situations when they had a couple injuries earlier on in the year. But a lot of stunting, even more so than what they did with Vic Fangio. That's kind of been his wrinkle into the pass rush here. And we'll see a lot of times on third downs, one of the big flaws here, or one of the big predictability points of this Bears defense is third down, it's man coverage 90% of the time. And so they'll do a lot of different like looks up front and try and bring some pressure from some different places. You know, they'll put Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn on the same side and put Akeem Hicks as like the edge rusher on the other side with a nose tackle. And it's kind of some funky things to look at, but it ends up usually just kind of being a standard 4-man rush there. So they've been able to get home consistently, and the Bears defense has kind of lived and died by that. But the secondary has been able to play pretty aggressive behind that, and I think there's some opportunity there to be challenged a little bit differently this week against the Vikings than what we've seen the last couple of weeks.
Sure, and when you you say they stunt and twist a lot. When you take a look at maybe how well the Vikings offensive linemen have communicated with each other. Not sure how much you've watched the Vikings, which if you haven't watched very much, I forgive you. How do you think this messes with the communication of an offensive line just generally, and how might it impact the Vikings?
Yeah, I don't even see it as necessarily. It's not always like a terrible communication issue when these stunts are winning. And I think I've seen Garrett Bradbury seem to take some steps forward, and I think another year of experience under his belt has him a little bit more prepared to call out some of these protections more accurately. I think that's been a point of improvement from last year for the Vikings offensive line. But I don't think it necessarily, like, they're not stunting and getting guys rushing free because there was just a miscommunication, but it's like Khalil Mack gets a much better angle when he's looping inside the right guard as opposed to just having to take a free run at the tackle where there's just all that space. So it's been more just leverage and angles more than true, zero blitzes and being able to kind of sneak through unblocked.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about those linebackers. So last year, Roquan Smith was a coverage guy that needed to improve against the run. This year, he is, especially the last couple of weeks, really good against the run. I mean, he was really critical to stopping Derrick Henry. Has he become a complete linebacker?
I'm not sure because he was really bad to start the season. So like the last,
right? Yeah. He's abysmal. Yeah.
Even as recently as like week 3 or 4, it was still like, oh man, what is going on with Roquan Smith? So then we've got like 3 or 4 games.
He was incredible last week, right?
Yeah, no, he was phenomenal. I mean, and it's like night and day in terms of the run defense in particular, where like in previous weeks he was overrunning gaps and he was trying to always shoot through and make the play when if he just kind of stayed in his gap, the running back would be, funneled somewhere else and somebody else would make the play, and he just needs to do his job. And like all of a sudden he's just like locked in, laser focused on getting to the ball carrier. And to some extent with Derrick Henry, I think there wasn't as much of a threat of him being the, cut back and be elusive in a tight space. He's more sort of the downhill physical type of runner. He's got speed, but just not short area explosiveness in the same way. So I think Henry's style helped, whereas, like Alvin Kamara a couple weeks ago was a little bit more challenging in that regard. But no, all of a sudden, Roquan Smith and Danny Trevathan has been a lot better than his initial struggles. So they're playing like complete linebackers right now, and I would assume that would continue against the Vikings, but we don't have a large body of evidence to say that it's a permanent change.
But you did point to something that might indicate that there's a difference, right? Because Dalvin Cook is that kind of runner where he'll make, quick cuts and stuff like that. Maybe not quite Alvin Kamara level, but, he does cut back. He doesn't take on contact as readily as Derrick Henry. Does that present like a concern in that regard?
Definitely more so than what we saw from Henry last week. But I think we've seen Roquan Smith still put together some strong games, against the Kamara. I mean, the Bears didn't have a great plan for stopping Kamara, or even they struggled with Todd Gurley the week before that. But I think we've seen the progressive progress from Roquan Smith over the last 3 or 4 games that I'm not as concerned as I would have been 5 weeks ago. But I do think there's a lot of opportunity for Dalvin Cook to have more success this week than what Derrick Henry had last week.
All right. And Danny Trevathan, you already mentioned that he's also improved. So if both of them improve at the same time, it feels like there's got to be an underlying reason for that, right?
Well, I I don't have a good answer for you. I mean, I think to some extent, part of the difference with Trevathan is like weeks 1 and 2, he looked like a slow old man, and all of a sudden he's moving much, like 3 or 4 years younger. So I wonder if he was just in bad shape.
So they're both on an HRT regimen. Is that what you're saying?
Honestly, yeah, it wouldn't. That seems like that's kind of like they both just like got into football shape, and they both seemed to kind of like dial in. Like there was sort of this rust they had to knock off, and some preseason, experience.
Oh yeah,
had
the lack of preseason.
Yeah, that's truly the Bears' biggest problem this season has been the lack of preseason, 100%. No, but I don't have a great answer for you. I mean, I think to some extent it's just sort of coaching and getting a little bit more into the swing of the season, and they've both been able to stay healthy up to this point. Not a lot of those kind of lingering injuries, so they're in a groove right now. And I think in terms of the run defense as a whole, the guys up front, in front of them, are playing a little bit better too. Bilal Nichols coming into his own a little bit, and now without Roy Robertson-Harris and John Jenkins has been injured, we're sort of in wait-and-see mode as they put more bench guys off the street into this defensive line rotation. But there's reason to be optimistic, I think, for the Bears defense, and there's reason to be optimistic that Cook could still kind of get his.
All right, and then let's talk about the defensive backs. Another strong group, honestly. Kyle Fuller's playing really well. Jalen Johnson's playing really well. And Sherrick McManus, he's seeing the field, but he just broke his finger, right? So we got Eddie Jackson and who else? Tashawn Gibson, is that who's going to play?
Yeah, McManus has been very light in terms of the defensive rotation. He's been more still his special teams ace, but it's Buster Skrine in the slot, and it's been Eddie Jackson and Tashawn Gibson on the back end. And even Eddie Jackson's been a little bit disappointing this year just because of how good he played a couple of years ago at sort of like an all-pro top safety level, and now he's had a lot more missed tackles and some poorer angles than we're used to seeing from him, and he's still very, very good. He's just not as elite as he once looked.
Sure. And so this secondary group, which it feels like is maybe driving things a little bit more than it looks like, because we've just talked about how talented all three levels of the defense are. But when you've got the capability to play man coverage with Kyle Fuller, Jalen Johnson, and be relatively confident that they'll win their matchups, it feels like you can do a lot more up front. So kind of like how the Ravens are really comfortable with their man coverage, so they blitz a lot, which, Bears maybe not blitzing, but they can do a little bit more with what they've got in front of them. What is it about Kyle Fuller's play? Didn't he struggle for like 4 years straight, and then he didn't get an option, played really well, got another contract? Like, first of all, what's his deal? Second, is Jalen Johnson playing as well as it seems like? Because I take a look at his PFF, like yards given up, and it's like 300 plus yards given up, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, that's a good player.
Yeah, he's been a phenomenal surprise just as a rookie stepping in there. But I'll start with Kyle Fuller. He was one of those deals that, like, it felt like the typical Ryan Pace thing where it's like he was bad for 3 or 4 years and then had that one good year and got paid, and you're like, wait a minute, are we giving this guy a long-term contract off of one good year? Like, this seems like not the best idea, but yet it's been the one that's paid off. I mean, he's been great ever since that one good year. I don't have a great answer as to what exactly changed. There was a lot of tension between he and Vic Fangio for a little while there, where I think there was some maturing that Kyle Fuller had to do, where it took a little bit of public, not chastising, but some very public
the airing of grievances, maybe?
Yeah, in both directions there. And I think eventually Fuller kind of put his nose to the grindstone and maybe started taking things a little bit more seriously, and now he's just got this level of confidence that he never feels like he's going to be out of place or beaten. Like, he knows when to be aggressive and when not to be. I think he's known as perhaps the deepest tape studier on the team, and it's been a huge boost for Jalen Johnson, having him kind of teach him how to watch film that nobody grinds in their iPad more than Kyle Fuller.
The grind Fuller, if you will.
Yeah, he's a Gruden grinder, 100%. But so he's just super prepared and knows every once in a while he'll get beat on a double move, but is usually pretty good at recovering and knowing when he has safety help over top. He just plays that off coverage the majority of the time, and he's going to let you eat up that space in front of him, and he's going to know when to turn and run with you, and he's going to know when to step up and contest that catch point. So he's been phenomenal. Jalen Johnson, much more in the Prince Amukamara role of physical press up at the line of scrimmage. He's had some penalties in terms of, downfield. More than, like, when you see the number, it was higher than I thought it was based on kind of anecdotally what you watch in a game. He's been great at the catch point. He's been everything you could possibly hope for from a rookie second-round pick, and maybe a little bit more. So no real concerns from them on the outside, but the matchup for me is Buster Skrine in the slot versus Adam Thielen, and when they want to put Justin Jefferson in the slot, that one's a little bit more of a concern.
Sure. What concerns you about it? I mean, obviously Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen are good, but like, tell me about Buster Screen.
Yeah, so it's not that Buster Screen has like been any worse than normal. He's just an average at best slot cornerback, and because you have aggressive, well, not always aggressive and in their own ways, Kyle Fuller and Jalen Johnson on the outside, there's been more of a penchant to attack the slot. I believe for Pro Football Focus numbers that Screen has given up the second most yards of any cornerback from the slot. And he's been on the field a lot. The Bears play a lot of nickel coverage and don't do a lot of the base defense when they can avoid it. So, like, I get some of that. It's not as bad as, like, he's not the second worst slot quarterback in the league. He's just given up a lot of yards. There's been some big plays over the top there, too. He's not terrible. It's just I trust him the least of the group, and generally offenses are pretty good at finding where the weakest link is going to be.
It's like the Antonio Cromartie syndrome when he signed with the Jets. It's just like, it looks like he's given up like 1,000 yards. What's going on?
Yeah, definitely.
No one wants to play against Terrell Revis.
100%.
All right, and then to Sean Gibson, tell me a little bit about him. And I know DeAndre Houston Carson has seen the field. I remember him making a big play a couple of weeks ago. Was that just an injury thing, or did they just rotate him in? What's going on?
Yeah, so Houston Carson has 2 game-winning plays this season out of like the 15 snaps he's played. He had it's phenomenal. He had and I forget whether he intercepted Tom Brady or the pass breakup was against Tom Brady, but there were 2 fourth-down plays in back-to-back weeks where Houston Carson is their nickel safety, essentially, or their dime safety, excuse me. When they bring in 6 defensive backs, he comes in that role because Deion Bush has been hurt and then was on COVID. Otherwise, that was the Deion Bush role. But it was back-to-back with the Buccaneers and the Panthers. I can't remember if he picked off Tom Brady in the last play. I think it was just a pass breakup where Brady threw it on 4th and 15, and Houston Carson broke it up. And then the next week against the Panthers, same kind of thing, 4th and 5 or whatever, throws it right to Houston Carson for the interception. So it was like back-to-back weeks, he was the hero. But otherwise, it's been 100% of the time to Sean Gibson and Eddie Jackson. Gibson had been fine for the majority of the season. There was randomly a game just a couple of weeks ago where I think it was the Saints. It was either Saints or the Rams game. I think it was the Rams game where he was just awful, and they just targeted him 10 times, and he gave up 10 catches for 100 yards or whatever. And like it was this weird, like, what the heck happened to Sean Gibson? But otherwise, he's been consistent. No big time playmaking, but he'll step up and make the tackles in the running game, and he'll be where he's supposed to be in coverage, and he's fine, and he gets the job done. But it's not stellar or exciting in any way.
What's the coverage shell that the Bears use the most often?
They're so what they like to do is show as many 2-deep pre-snap looks as they possibly can, and then they rotate very regularly. So they're primarily still a cover 3 defense with a lot of cover 1 in there. You're not really sure, and a lot of times their slots will carry the seams vertical so it looks like man coverage from the slots when everyone else is
like
in.
to protect against like 4 verts and stuff like
exactly. that. Exactly. So it still looks very similar with a lot of that 3-deep coverage, but it's primarily cover 3 and cover 1. Vic Fangio used to do a lot more cover 6, and that's been kind of the big difference with Chuck Pagano as he's gone away from a lot less of that and a lot more cover 2. Still about the same amount of cover 4, but primarily, again, 3 and 1 single deep, but they'll show you a lot of 2 deep, so you're not exactly sure who's going to stay back there and who's going to come up to the line of scrimmage.
All right, cool. Well, let's talk about the offense, where it's going to be, I think, a little bit more positive for Vikings fans. A lot. It's the truth, right? Let's talk about... I was going to make a joke and talk about the fullback. No, let's just talk about Nick Foles. So with the preseason, Nick Foles probably would have won the job, I think. I'm just saying. I have no idea.
No, he would. But yes. No, you're not wrong.
But he's not like an amazing quarterback, and he hasn't been playing amazingly. How would you evaluate his play so far, and how would you describe his style of play?
Well, it's his style of play he's Nick Foles. You know what I mean? Like he is. I realize that's not descriptive, but anything you already know about Nick Foles, that's what we're seeing this year. I guess is my point. He is statuesque, which is. You can live with that. Like, basically, when the Bears benched Trubisky for Foles, what they traded was...
I just want to pause right here.
Yeah.
Whenever anyone outside of football describes someone as statuesque, that's like an enormous compliment, right? It's just like, this person is tall, handsome, fantastic. And in football, it's like, he can't move.
Yeah, like, there was... do you remember when Joe Biden came out for his speech and he did that little jog off the stage? Onto the stage. That's how Nick Foles scrambles.
Nick Foles.
Yeah, I mean he does it like, and there's been it's like a giraffe, just like out. The legs are kind of flailing, and it's not fast, and it's just it's awkward. But so like the Bears traded Trubisky's mobility for Nick Foles' processing. That was why they made that quarterback change. And Foles he sees the field pretty well. He's got a very good command of the offense. That's why he's on the field, and that's why Matt Nagy went to him, and why I think he would have gone to him week 1 if there had been a preseason. But there was just so much catching up he had to do in terms of timing with your receivers that lingered even once he did take in the starting lineup. But he's kind of the same old Nick Foles, where 2 or 3 throws a game, you're wondering why the heck he's putting the ball up there. And I guess you could say he's giving his receivers a chance, but usually he's giving the defensive back a better chance. So it's not – there's 2 or 3 of those decisions every game that just confound you. But otherwise it's sort of the check down, quick throw offense, getting everything out underneath, especially with the state of this Bears offensive line. Last week starting 3 players for their first career snaps at their respective positions.
Oh.
I lied. Rashad Coward, their right tackle, played 1 snap at right tackle the previous week and then came back out because it was a 1-play injury situation. But then it was his first game ever playing right tackle, center's first game ever playing center, even through college, and left guard first game playing left guard, even through college. So it was rough.
Okay, then. I guess that makes sense. So, I mean, so Foles hasn't thrown that many turnover-worthy plays. Like, it's not like, 1% or anything. It was around 3%, but he has 7 interceptions. Is he actually a little unlucky in the turnover department, or like, does he like kind of deserve all of those?
Yeah, it's a good, because he's had a couple that he's gotten away with a couple, but it's hard to feel like he's been unlucky because they feel very deserved, but at the same time, I think from from like a percentage standpoint, it feels like he's probably hasn't had as many dropped as he could have. Like, it seems like when he puts them up there, they're getting picked off. So I guess he's been a little bit unlucky, but none of them have been like, I don't think he's thrown an interception that has been a good decision, right? He's not getting tipped off of his receiver's hand and then ends up in the hands of a defensive back. Maybe there was one earlier in the season, but for the most part, the balls that are picked off are balls that deserve to be picked off. But maybe other quarterbacks get a little bit luckier.
A little bit more from dropped like Patrick Mahomes.
Exactly, where the DBs just don't have good hands. For some reason, they seem to have very good hands when Foles gives them the ball.
So I made this joke on a Bears podcast yesterday that Foles throws a very interceptable ball. I didn't even realize that this seems to be the case up until I actually just pulled up the turnover-worthy play numbers for this podcast. Do you think – so this is just wild speculation, but when when the Eagles – no, it wasn't the Eagles. It was the Browns. When the Browns were on Hard Knocks and Michael Kendricks was like, you got to watch out for the trajectory of Foles' ball. It falls kind of like a teardrop. And then they got a pick in that preseason off of Foles. Do you think that weird kind of scouting report from a former teammate of his might have made his passes just that much more interceptable league-wide?
I don't think so, just because...
But it's funny.
Yeah, it's very funny. No, you're not wrong. But I just think, like, when he gets intercepted, it's like, it's just such a... It's almost like the Jay Cutler experience. Like, it's not the same experience because, like, because Jay would launch it 100 yards. But, like, it's a similar feeling when the ball is let go that you're just like, oh, my God. Like, what is he doing?
Where is this going?
And it's like this guy was consistent and accurate for the entire previous drive, and for whatever reason, this one time he either sees something that he thought he wasn't going to see, or a lot of times there's been some miscommunications where he's thrown to a spot and the receiver is not there, and there's a defensive back right there, and it's just an easy kind of lobbed up interception. So yeah, it's again they feel very deserved, and it's not as though defensive backs are like making this elite diving pick that just they got him. It's like, no, Foles put that one up there, and you can't live with too many of those.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about the running game. David Montgomery is among the league leaders in forced missed tackles, and yet is not very good. And I don't say that just because the production that David Montgomery has put together is not very good. We know that running backs can be separate from their production, but I also don't think that he's very good. So why is he? Am I wrong about that? Why is he forcing so many missed tackles and is also like not good at running back? Like, we can talk about the offensive line in a second, but is he a good running back that's just being brutalized by an offensive line, or is he bad at other stuff? Explain the forced missed tackle thing.
Yeah, so right, I do feel like it's a little bit hard to tell, especially with the current state of the Bears offensive line, and I realize we'll get into that a little bit, but I know in terms of yards before contact, I think they're one of 2 teams that has allowed negative yards before contact on average this season per run. And so, like, keep wanting to give him the benefit of the doubt that, like, I don't know very many running backs that could be all that successful in these spots. And he is doing a pretty good job of making guys miss in some tight windows. But at the same time, you know, if you go back through the coach's film and you try and nitpick his vision and some of his decision-making, there are times where, you know, if he had picked a slightly different gap on zone, would he have gotten an extra yard or two? Probably. So, but it's not like it was going to be the difference between the run getting 0 yards and 10. You know, so it's like the vision is not elite. You know, unlike the graphic from college football that everyone posts literally every Sunday where it's
I gotta have that saved.
Yeah, it's feet of Saquon Barkley, vision of Le'Veon Bell, and patience of Ezekiel or whatever. I mean, he is not that. He is not an elite NFL running back. But I think he's
Have you tweeted that recently? I need to make sure I get that.
I do not. I do not have it saved anywhere. But every Sunday, you'll see it tweeted a few times. This Sunday,
I want to be first, Lauren. That's the point.
You want to be the one that tweets it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. So he's a fine runner. He's probably an average starting quality running back, which is. You don't necessarily want to trade up in the third round for, but that's fine. He's fine. He's not the reason the running game is so bad, but a better running back could maybe have a little bit more production. But the last couple of weeks, I don't know that anybody could.
All right, great. I just found it. Now I'm forever cursed with having feet of Saquon Barkley in my Twitter search history, but it was worth it.
Can you read them all if you have it there?
Yeah, sure. I just got to say this real quick.
Because one is Rashad Penny, and that's the one that always makes me laugh.
Feet of Saquon Barkley, vision of Le'Veon Bell, strength of Ezekiel Elliott. Is Zeke known for his strength?
Well, I mean, he's got the muscles, the 6-pack and the biceps, and he does the eating out of the bowl, Sure.
Right, but he's not like
a
remarkably weak running back or anything like that. But if I was going to pick the strongest running back in the NFL, back when this running back Frankenstein graphic was, I probably would not have picked Zeke.
No, I don't. Yeah, Zeke would have been just barely in the NFL then. Yeah.
Athleticism of Sony Michel.
Yeah, athleticism of Sony Michel. That one's a little more accurate, I think.
Yeah, that one, they nailed that one. All right, and then backup running backs. Anything I should know about them?
What you should know is that David Montgomery.
Isn't Ryan Nall like a super spark guy? Am I thinking of someone else?
I don't remember that exclusively off the top of my head. I mean, he's not that fast. He's just big. He was like a hybrid fullback a lot at Oregon State.
Yeah, he's a fullback. Yeah.
So I mean, he's got the big size and strength. What you need to know is that David Montgomery's in the concussion protocol at this point, and to be determined whether or not he'll be ready to go week 1. And Lamar Miller is on the Bears practice squad, ready and waiting, presumably. The Bears have said for 3 weeks now, we love Lamar Miller, and we can't wait to get him in our offense. And everyone's like, okay, looking at our watches, like, what you waiting for?
Like, this is not hard.
Tariq Cohen's been gone, on injured reserve for like 6 weeks now. Like, what? And Miller's coming off a big injury last year, and it's going to take some time to get acclimated to the offense. I get that, but going on almost a month now on the practice squad feels like if there was ever a week they're going to call him up, they're going to wait till the last minute and then make Lamar Miller maybe even their starting running back in this game, because behind him it's Ryan Nall and undrafted rookie free agent Artavis Pierce, who was Nall's teammate at Oregon State. Neither one of those guys. And then, of course, Cordell Patterson, your love affair is ready in the backfield, but that's not a full-time role either.
The best kick returner in Bears history.
The best kickoff returner, 100%. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, no, we'll go there. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. I would like to see him return punts, though. Like, there's got to be a reason, like, 4 separate teams decided not to. But
yeah, and the Bears, I mean, when Tariq Cohen got hurt, they put Ted Ginn back there, and he refused to catch the ball. Anthony Miller's gone back there. They brought up Dwayne Harris off the practice squad to return punts. That's the only reason he's on the roster, and I don't know why they haven't just thrown Cordell Patterson back there. Well, I think, okay, let me answer that. They don't put Cordell Patterson back there because he's on the blocking for the punt team, and they value him so much as a gunner and on the other areas of the punt team.
Yeah, he is really good at the other special team stuff.
I guess, but
wild.
You'd think his explosiveness, you could find somebody else to be on the other special team stuff and let Patterson return.
I would tend to agree, yeah.
I don't know. It's been, like you said, 4 teams.
He's returning punts. Who's going to block for him? I can't get over that. Okay. No, but I mean, like 4 separate teams have decided for him not to return punts.
Yeah.
There's got to be something.
I couldn't tell you what it is. I have no idea.
Yeah, I would still like to see it. Okay, yeah. So, well, actually, let's talk about Cordell Patterson, the running back. Is he any good at running back?
Again, like Montgomery, it's a little bit hard to tell.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
They have very specific roles for Cordell Patterson. It's not a wide variety of rushing concepts. They'll do some different looks with him, but generally speaking, they're trying to get him out on the edge and kind of create those similar like kickoff feeling situations where they'll put a fullback in the game and it's kind of like having a lead blocker and you run an outside zone or a crack toss and then he's just reading the open field like he's back returning kicks. So like it's 10 to 15 or 5 to 10 snaps a game in the backfield like that and some receiver in there too. So he's a fine mix it up number 3 running back type option, but he's not a full-time running back and he's not really that. That's not who he is.
Yeah, okay. I have long been a contrarian when it comes to Cordell Patterson, the running back. I don't really think that he's a fit there. But New England for a brief moment proved me wrong and then proved me right. Let's talk about the rest of the receiver core. So you've got super route runners Riley Ridley and Anthony Miller, who are not good. I should say not seeing the field. I actually like Anthony Miller and how he's done this.
Miller's been seeing the field a lot. He just can't catch the ball when they throw it to him.
Well, so Riley Ridley? His thing was running routes. Why isn't he seeing the field? I mean, he's a 4th round pick. It's not like crazy unusual, but I expected more.
Yeah, no, he was a healthy scratch every week until last week because Javon Wims got into that fight with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, was suspended.
That's right.
And then they cut Ted Ginn because he was so bad at punt returns. They just said, "F you, get out of here! Like we're done." So that was what got Riley Ridley on the field for the first time. I don't have a great answer for you. I mean, I don't know if it's an understanding of the offense thing. The Bears they've said all along, we like Riley. We're still excited about his progress. We think he's got a lot of potential still, and their actions have not really matched those words. So something's going on there behind the scenes. But he had a catch last week and finally got on the field. And I believe last year against the Vikings, he had a couple of nice catches too. So maybe he's their secret weapon this week. But it's going to be 99% Robinson, Mooney, Miller, and then a few sprinkles here and there for Patterson and Ridley.
So at the beginning of the year, it felt like Miller was turning things around, and then he had like a big play to win a game or something like that, right? And then kind of nothing. Is it just that he can't catch, or is he not getting targets? What's the deal?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, he's still a great route runner. I mean, the guy is open all the time, and that's never been any of the problem in Chicago. Initially, there was some challenges getting on the same page with Nick Foles. They were not, thrown to spots where Miller was supposed to be, and some question of who knew the route and who didn't, and who was supposed to be there. And that was the problem with Miller early in his career. Like the Bears wide receivers coach, like this, as recently as this preseason, was like, yeah, we couldn't trust Anthony Miller last year. Like we couldn't trust him, so we couldn't put him in those situations. And claimed that now he's different and better and that now they can trust him. And then started this season again after that first big game, his role pretty well dropped off. And then the last couple of weeks, they found that trust again. And it seems like he and Foles have a little bit of a better understanding, and his hands have been a little bit better as of late too. But it's still like a concentration thing where he's trying to run before he finishes catching the ball. And it's just little things like that it's to the point where you just accept that he's going to drop a couple of them, and you can kind of live with that if he keeps getting open. But in the grand scheme of this Bears offense, the bigger issue has been Nick Foles and then the offensive line and what kind of passing plays they've been able to execute downfield.
Okay. But rookie Darnell Mooney, also from the AAC, just kind of wanted to throw that out there. It just felt like worth mentioning.
Tulane.
Yeah. Green. I need to get myself Green Wave.
I kid you not. Last night I was on that one website that sells all the throwback
Home Field. Sponsor us Home Field. Actually, we don't do sponsors, but still, give us money.
I had the Tulane shirt in my cart, and I opted for a Stony Creek shirt instead. But I was no. I was trying to decide between the Tulane Green Wave, the Stony Creek, and then UC Irvine Anteaters basketball team is the one I ended up going with. But I was torn between all three of those.
I get it. Yeah. I think I'm going to get Green Wave by the end of the year.
They have a couple different really cool Green Wave ones where he's holding the little flag, and it's just like an angry wave. It's so cool.
Oh, he's got the flag. Okay, yeah, I'm already sold. Okay, let's talk about Darnell Mooney. So I mean, he was a do everything guy, right, at Tulane. But here, I mean, with the Bears, it seems like he's just a receiver.
I don't recall him doing a lot of running back. I mean, he was a kick returner for them at Tulane, but I don't recall him
maybe
too
I'm an
much
idiot.
in the backfield.
Don't worry about it.
But definitely a big deep threat was but that was his bread and butter at Tulane. He just has speed and he gets open deep. And in Chicago, we've seen him develop into more of a more well-rounded receiver where he can run more, in breaking routes that require a little bit more precision and picked up the offense very quickly. That was one of the things he said just a couple weeks ago. He's like, yeah, when I was in college, I was always so busy with classes and stuff. I didn't really have a lot of time to watch film. So like I kind of had to figure things out on the fly when we'd get on the field. But he's like,
life's
now
different in the group of 5, huh?
yeah, that's for sure. But like now he's like, I can watch tape all week and I know what my opponent's gonna do before I get on the field, and it's great. Like I can.
This is wild.
Yeah, he's like, it's so like that's why he steps in week 1 as a starter and has been a huge boost for this offense as a rookie 5th-round pick out of, again, group of 5 Tulane over there. So like he's been a very welcome addition. You're going to see Nick Foles take 1 or 2 deep shots to Mooney in the game. Usually they'll connect on at least one, but a few others will be off target, and he's going to try and stretch you a little bit vertically, and he's been a great compliment to Allen Robinson for sure.
All right, so this I think raises a really interesting question. So Darnell Mooney is clearly held back by the offense around him, right? Get rid of our understanding of everybody's statistics right now. So obviously Justin Jefferson's doing really well. CeeDee Lamb did really well at the beginning of the season. Chase Claypool's had a couple of great games. Where do you rank Darnell Mooney just based off of like what you've seen on film against the rest of this rookie class? So Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Chase Claypool, Laviska Shenault, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, T. Higgins, some pretty good receivers in this class. Brandon Ayuk. Where do you put him compared to Van Jefferson? Where do you put him compared to all those guys?
When you first started asking the question, my immediate reaction was top 5, and then as you started reading all of those names, right? I was like, "Oh man,
that's right."
There's a lot of those.
He would clearly be like top 3 in other classes,
yes.
And in this class, I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah, I can't find I really struggle to put him over like the CeeDee Lambs and Jerry Jeudy's of the world, and I know Justin Jefferson has been phenomenal too, and then Claypool comes on the board. It's like the longer I start talking through it, I keep bumping him down and down. I'd still
T.
put
Higgins, right? You gotta be like, well, I gotta give that guy props.
Yeah, so I feel like that 5 to 7 range I can live with, and like you said, in a different wide receiver class, I mean, he would be top 3, but I right around number 5, I can feel a little bit more comfortable with.
I would think he's better than Claypool, honestly. I would put him above Claypool.
I haven't like gone in depth on Claypool. I've seen enough of Claypool to be like, wow, but if you put Darnell Mooney in that spot, I can't help but feel like he would be able to do all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, that's why it feels like it's nitpicky at this point when you start talking about the difference between 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Is put any of these guys in any of those orders, and it's hard to argue too much in either direction.
I think you can argue your way up to 3, which it'll take some doing, but I think you can argue your way up to 3. I love Darnell Mooney, and then of course Allen Robinson, who I picked midseason as one of the top 6 performers this year, and the only reason he statistically is not matching up with these other receivers is of course the rest of this offense. Is that too bold? Am I overcorrecting? I think he's good.
He's very good. I mean, there's no.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's fair. I shouldn't. I think he's great.
He is legitimately one of the top. He's a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. He's not a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, but he's in that maybe 10 to 15 range if I want to be as modest as possible. But like he is so good. He gets open. He can win anywhere on the field. He's going to win contested catches downfield. He's going to be a deep threat. He's good underneath. I mean, he's not an explosive athlete. He's not going to break 100 tackles, and he's not Tyreek Hill by any means. But like he is everything you need in a number 1 wide receiver and more. I mean, he's on the field, off the field. The one thing I'll say this season is there have been a couple of plays early on where it's been a 50-50 jump ball, and they ended up as interceptions, where you typically would think Allen Robinson is going to win that. And it wasn't like any bad effort by Robinson. He just kind of had weird leverage and jumped at it a little bit early or a little bit late, depending on which ones you're looking at. And those have been as close to like the head-scratching Allen Robinson plays. But otherwise, it's the hands, it's contested catches, it's everything you need from your top receiver. He just doesn't have an offensive line or a consistent enough quarterback to make it work.
Cool. Well, let's talk about we'll talk about the offensive line side. I just want to finish out the skill group. So you've got Jimmy Graham, who at the beginning of the season seemed like a great addition, which people were surprised by, but it seems like he hasn't really panned out. You've got your classic 2nd-round pick tight end who may or may not pan out, and then a couple of people who survived the Hunger Games of training camp that they had there. So tell me a little bit about this tight end group, and also, is J.P. Holtz a tight end or a fullback?
He's more fullback at this point, but they'll line him up at tight end and kind of do some H-back stuff with him, but
Okay.
minuscule
Some
role.
old Jim Kleinsasser stuff. Though.
Yeah, definitely. Like, they kind of alternate between Null and Holtz at fullback, and it's kind of a weird thing, but it's only 5 or at most snaps a game, so it's not anything that is going to affect the Vikings' game plan by any means. Jimmy Graham has been very much the Jimmy Graham of Green Bay as opposed to the Jimmy Graham of New Orleans and to some extent Seattle, where red zone.
At least in Seattle, he performed in the red zone. Yeah,
and he's been pretty good in the red zone in Chicago. I'll give him that, but like, he's lazy on his route running. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like effort sometimes. You're just like, what are you here for? Like, he's collecting a check. Like, he'll just run to a spot and turn around and stand there. He catches it when you throw it to him, and if he's open, you know, he'll work with it a little bit here and there. But like, outside of the red zone, doesn't seem like he's trying that hard. And I mean, definitely as a blocker. At one point, Matt Nagy was trying to sell him to us as a blocker and be like, you'd be surprised if you go back and watch the tape how well Jimmy Graham blocked in that one game, and then every other game since then
and watched the tape.
He's been awful. I mean, he's just been awful in the Brown game. So like, it's better than what they had at tight end last year, but it was such a low bar that I think we don't properly appreciate in Chicago that tight end is still a problem in this offense, because again, it is better than how bad it was last year.
What happened to Trey Burton? Where is he?
Indianapolis Colts, and he was.
Oh, that's right.
He started the year injured, but now since then he's had a couple of pretty good games.
Huh? Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that.
Tell me a little bit about Cole Kmet. I think he was the top tight end to go in this class, right?
Yeah.
He
was, and this is another one of these Matt Nagy things where, you know, from the start, Cole Kmet was the non-existent preseason darling this year, where at training camp practices it was like, oh man, Cole Kmet has been so great. Jimmy Graham was too, to some extent, but it was like, oh man, get ready, Cole Kmet, he's advanced, he's already looking like he's going to be a key member of this offense, and then his role for the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season was almost non-existent. And then Matt Nagy was like, yeah, we really like him, and we got to get him a bigger role. And the next game he played 15 snaps. And Matt Nagy's like, yeah, 15 snaps isn't enough. We got to play him more. And it's like, you are the head coach. Like, you decide how much he plays. He's like, yeah, we got to get him on the field more, man. He's good.
Yeah,
we got to play him.
It's just so weird. You know, this gate just appears right in front of him. You can't get through it. I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's so like Kmet has made a couple of plays, and typically you'd like your first pick in the draft, the number 1 tight end in the draft selected, to make more than a couple of plays through the first 9 weeks of the season. He's their number 2 tight end and hasn't been, you know, he's made a couple of impressive catches, but it's not like he's getting open all the time and being this big dynamic threat by any means. He's just been kind of a average number 2 tight end at this point, which again, better than what they had last year, but would be disappointing if we didn't have that context.
So are they going to draft another tight end in the second round a year from now, 2 years from now?
You know, if they didn't need a quarterback, an entire offensive line, and probably some young pass rushers, maybe.
All right. Well, let's talk about this offensive line. So there's a guy named Arlington Hambright.
Elite
I just
name.
wanted to note that.
He started at left guard last week.
Christ.
Yes, that's where this offensive line is. Rookie 7th-round pick Arlington Hambright out of Colorado, who never played guard in college, started at left guard last week.
That's great. Okay, cool. So that's what we're working with. So Alex Bars is a guy that I felt like every time he played, when I'm doing my players of the week and like some defensive tackle pops off, I don't include them if they played against Drew Samia or Alex Bars. Is that unfair, or is he really that abysmal? Because he just does not seem good to me.
So he started at center last week, and it was the first time.
That's right. Yeah, that was weird.
And it was the first time he's ever played center in his football career. As far as I went back to his high school days, and I couldn't tell for sure that he never played center in high school, but never played in college.
Seems unlikely, right?
Yeah, seems unlikely. So I try and give him a little bit of, and same with Arlington Hambright at left guard, and then Rashad Coward started at right tackle last week, all their first time ever playing those positions in a meaningful football game. So I think Bars has been bad. I mean, he's not good right now, but I thought he was a little bit better in pass protection, where he could kind of drop back and have some space, whereas like when he's trying to snap the ball and then immediately block a nose tackle in front of him in a running game, he just
That's tough, man.
He can't get his hands inside quick enough. It's so new for him. And so, yeah, nose tackles against him in the running game have had all sorts of success, and he's been pretty bad in that regard. Hasn't been perfect in pass protection by any means, but it has sort of, about what you would expect there from a former undrafted free agent at a new position. But in theory, he might not have to play center this week. They might be able to reshuffle some things with guys coming back, but it's a little bit up in the air.
So who is coming back potentially?
Right now, for sure, Jason Spriggs, the former Packers second-round pick offensive tackle, he was removed from the COVID list from last week, and he will almost certainly start at right tackle. And so then Rashad Coward, who started at right tackle last week, was starting at left guard after James Daniels was on injured reserve. So in theory, we're expecting Rashad Coward to move back to left guard, but what we're not clear on yet from an injury standpoint, especially with it being a Monday game, Cody Whitehair is coming back from a calf injury, and it's not clear. And then he got COVID last week too, so he's still on the COVID list and he's injured. So we're not sure. We're not sure how soon he's going to be healthy, both physically and disease-wise. So that's kind of up in the air. And then their normal backup center, James Daniels was their backup center. Their new backup center, who they called up off the practice squad, Sam Mustipher, a fellow Notre Dame offensive lineman with Alex Bars.
That's the name of a planet in Star Wars. I just want
it's the Mustafar system for sure.
Yeah. Glad we're on the same page.
Yeah, 100%. He suffered a calf injury 2 weeks ago, but finished and played the whole game, and then it was kind of a surprise when all of a sudden that he couldn't play on Sunday against the Titans. So we're not sure if he's going to be ready to play against the Vikings. He didn't practice at all last week. He was a DNP, so he might need one more game out, and then the Bears have their bye week before he can come back. So if he's still out and Cody Whitehair's still out, then Alex Bars is likely going to start at center once again, and then it's a matter of whether it's Rashad Coward or Arlington Hambright for the first-team all-name left guard this week. They also have their other rookie 7th-round pick, Lachavious Simmons, could also be in the mix at left guard, but he's also on the COVID list. So
wow, they just keep getting good names, man.
Elite names, and 4 or 5 offensive linemen with COVID and 3 or 4 others with injuries. That's why it's Charles Leno and Jermaine Ifedi are their 2 healthy offensive linemen, and they're also probably their 2 worst offensive linemen of the starters. The regular starters.
So left tackle is going to be Charles Leno.
Yes.
Left guard, we have to see if Jason Spriggs is
Jason
returning.
Spriggs is back, and he's going to play right tackle almost 100%.
Yeah, and so Jason Spriggs playing right, and so that moves Rashad Coward to left guard?
Presumably. He was really bad at left guard before, though. So, but Arlington Hambright was really bad, too. And so assuming Alex Bars is going to play center, otherwise Bars could play left guard. But as of now, the expected lineup is Leno and then Coward at left guard with Bars at center.
And so center Bars probably, and then right guard Jermaine Ifedi, who is healthy.
Yes.
Okay, and then Jason Spriggs. And then the backups are potentially Lachavious Simmons, if he's off the COVID list, Arlington Hambright. Are there any backup tackles?
Not right now. Rashad Coward would be your
right,
because Jason Spriggs was your backup tackle.
Right.
The other wild card here is that the Bears just added Eric Kush to their practice squad. He's a veteran who's bounced around a lot, but he actually has started games for the Bears in Matt Nagy's offense at guard and I think also center. And so if he's ready to go from practice squad to active roster this week, he could easily step in and start at either center or left guard depending on where they want to put Alex Bars and where they feel more comfortable with those guys. But again, it was literally like yesterday that they brought him back onto the practice squad. So not sure if he's going to be able to pass all of the COVID tests and everything to be ready to go for Monday.
So, I mean, this is like pretty disastrously bad, but
yes,
they are going up against the Vikings defensive line. So up against Ifedi Odenigbo, Hercules Mataafa playing end, DJ Wanham.
Elite name matchup in the trenches here. Wow.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, absolutely, right. Hercules and Odenigbo up against some pretty phenomenal names too. Up against and then also a defensive tackle, you've got Shamar Stephan, you've got Jaleel Johnson, and maybe Armin Watts. I don't know who else will be playing defensive tackle for them. So those are the 6 guys that might end up playing against them. After going over those names and what you know about their extensive NFL careers, how do you feel now that those names have been brought up?
It's interesting because like last week, getting ready for the Tennessee Titans game, I talked to a guy who covers the Tennessee Titans, and he was like, listen, the Titans pass rush in their front 7 is awful. It's like one of the worst in the NFL. Like the Titans played the Bengals the week before and made the Bengals offensive line look like a group of Pro Bowlers. Like Billy Price and like their terrible offensive lineman bust type players played the best games of their career against the Titans front seven. And so he was like, this Bears offensive line should be fine against Tennessee. And they got absolutely obliterated by Jack Crawford.
But I mean, like Jeffrey Simmons is pretty good, though.
He is. You know, but their edge rushers were Harold Landry and like Derek Robertson. I mean, Jadeveon Clowney didn't play in that game. You know what I mean? Like it was. So what I'm saying is to bring it back to the Vikings here. The Bears played probably a worse defense, at least in terms of the front seven last week, than they did against the Vikings, and they were just demolished up front. A couple of times in pass protection, Nick Foles had some time to throw, but for the most part, it was really bad. So I mean, unless you get Eric Kush coming in there and solidifying some things, and if Jason Spriggs plays really well, and all of a sudden you can reduce the number of horrible problem spots on this offensive line down to 1 or 2, you know, maybe this group can kind of put some stuff together, but I'm not confident in this offensive line being able to give David Montgomery very much room to run and give Nick Foles a whole lot of time to throw.
All right, so with all of that in mind, the beacon of positivity that you've been. Now, actually, let's talk a little bit about special teams. Is kicker figured out? Are they good now?
Surprisingly, yeah. Like Cairo Santos has been solid. Like he hit some like 50+ yarders, sent it into overtime against the Saints, and like he's been really. They've got like 2 good kickers now because like they like Eddie Pinero. They stashed him on injured reserve at the start of the season and was like trying to get by with Cairo Santos, and now Santos is the guy. So yeah.
Huh, interesting. And Cordell Patterson, I've got him in one of my return leagues because he always takes it out. Is that still true?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, fantastic. That's all I wanted to know. Like, I don't like he's good, and he'll probably get it to the 30 a couple of times.
If he can get to it and catch it, it's coming out.
Yeah. But I just need the return yards because it's an insane league that they give me this.
Is that your number one overall pick right there, Cordell Patterson?
No one drafted him until me in like the 8th round, and I was like, "What is everyone doing?" They're like, you were all talking about how this was a return league, and you're not getting the only returner. Like, come on!
And you get a few offensive yards in there too. It's a great pick.
Right? Yeah. He did disappoint me like 2 weeks ago or something, but it must have just been kicking touchbacks.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be true for the Vikings. Can't wait for him to return it. Okay, cool. So the Vikings are favored by, it looks like consensus, by about 2 points. At one point it was 3.5, which, you know, it's a pretty big move for Vegas, the field goal difference. On the other hand, the Vikings have underperformed the spread by about a touchdown in Chicago when they play at Soldier Field. Plus, it's a Monday night game. We all know about Kirk Cousins on Monday night. Those are all like narratives. Those aren't like hard raw data. But also the Bears are like not good. So what are your thoughts? Who's going to win by how much? Give us a score.
Yeah, for me, it's going to come down to 100% this Bears offensive line. That if they can put together some kind of group of 5 NFL quality players.
Group of 5.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like if they can just get 5 human beings.
If they all band together and play like Tulane.
Yeah, no, for real though, like if it's better, if they can just put something together, I think this Bears offense can do enough against this Vikings defense. Like I have complete confidence in this Bears defense. Living with Dalvin Cook getting some yards, but more or less kind of holding Kirk Cousins down and limiting this really efficient Vikings offense. I still think the Bears defense will make it quite difficult on them, and not going to be.
Well, I mean, the Bears defense did well last week. It was just a bunch of other random crap that happened against the Titans, right?
Yeah, I mean, 7 of the 24 the Titans scored were a fumble recovery for a touchdown from David Montgomery. So I mean, like it was otherwise holding them to 17 points, and it was kind of like late in game, and yeah, it was not. There were like 2 big plays where they missed a couple of tackles that ended up taking a 10-yard gain to a 50-yard gain, and other than that, stellar for 4 quarters. So like they're gonna do fine against the defense is gonna do a good enough job against the Vikings offense that an average NFL offense would be able to win that game. But I don't know that the Bears offensive line is gonna give them enough to make them an average offense, especially with challenges at running back and quarterback and tight end and some of the receiver spots. So like the receivers are good. I got carried away with that, but they've got some real issues offensively. So I think Vikings by 2 or 3 seems like a good margin for me, unless all of a sudden the Bears can just kind of put something together. But like Matt Nagy's answer to, what's going to change, what's going to be, how is this team going to get better? He's like, our leaders just got to step up and make plays. Playmakers just got to make plays. So clearly they have a very good plan to turn this around. Like
clearly,
there's not a lot of accountability. There's not a lot of like action. It just seems like they keep trying to fit these guys into the offense, and the Matt Nagy offense works if you have a good offensive line and a good quarterback and good receivers. It works, but they don't have any of that, and they haven't been able to adjust properly to not having those pieces. So I'll take the Vikings by a small margin.
Okay. Tyler Bray, Kyle Sloter are on the practice squad at quarterback, and you can choose them or Nick Foles or any member of the defense to play quarterback. Who are you picking?
So Nick Foles is. I don't think Nick Foles is that bad. I mean, he's not great, but if you gave Nick Foles a really good good offensive line, I think the Bears' offense would be clicking in a much more noticeable way. Like I don't think he's been that terrible as much as like Bears fans are ready to bench him back for Trubisky if Trubisky were healthy, which he's not.
For Trubisky.
There's been a big put Trubisky back in movement. I mean, except for he came in for one play 2 weeks ago for the Taysom Hill role and did a read option with a running back and injured his shoulder and is out for a couple weeks and might need surgery. So like that's kind of gone out the window. But no, the better question is Nick Foles and this offensive line or Kyle Sloter and a good offensive line, and that one. I might go Kyle Sloter or Tyler Bray behind a good offensive line versus Nick Foles in this offensive line. Because, again, Foles not great, but he can do enough to win you the game if everything else is better.
All right, and question from Twitter, how good would the Bears be if they had just guaranteed the starting job to Teddy? Because the offensive line's still a problem, but Teddy's kind of used to that.
Yeah, they would be better. They would have been better the last few weeks before. They might not have lost the same game to the Colts or even the same game to the Rams, but like the last two, the offensive line has been so bad that I don't know that very many quarterbacks could have been successful back there. So I don't know that their record would be appreciably better because they still are 5-4, but I would have more confidence in the offense 100% with Teddy back there. I think he can do a lot more for you than what Nick Foles can. Although, to Nick Foles' credit, his knowledge of this offense in particular and his experience with Matt Nagy has been good. But I guess with Teddy, I would have hope for the long term, and there's not really any of that in Chicago right now.
All right, great. Well, on that note, thanks for coming on.
I mean, it's not that dissimilar from where the Vikings are in terms of like.
Oh yeah. No, it's a tire fire over here. Long term.
You need a quarterback and some stuff, but you don't have cap space and you don't have a lot of draft picks. Like, all right.
Yeah, well, at least they got a first round. Well, actually, did the Bears have a first round pick this year?
They do, actually.
Wow, incredible. What's that feel like?
It's so weird. And yet everyone's still like, wow, they're not going to be able to get a quarterback anyway. They're going to be picking too late because they won too many games. So.
It's exactly like the Vikings. Okay.
Offensive tackle it is. Woo.
Exactly like the Vikings. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, man. Where can people find you?
Yeah, well, you love to highlight it, of course, the Twitter handle at Cox Sports 1. It's like Fox Sports 1 with a C. 16-year-old Lauren was very clever when he came up with that. But you can hear me 5 days a week on the Locked On Bears podcast. Still do some grading for the good folks over at Pro Football Focus as well. But, always tweeting about football and other dumb stuff like David Montgomery position comparisons.
All right. Thanks so much, man.
Hey, anytime, man.
All right, let's go to the mailbag. And the first question is from Chris, who asks, how are the DBs that left in the offseason doing? Given where the Vikings are at, who would you have kept?
I don't know if you caught a sense of how Xavier Rhodes was doing based off of the broadcast, but Rhodes is playing really, really well. I kept him off of my midseason players of the year list. I think I may have made him an honorable mention. I don't know. But a couple of Colts fans got kind of mad about it, which I think is a good indication that he's doing pretty well. Now, the reason I kept him off the list is because his production is largely his best production came against the Jets, and he hasn't repeated that performance. He had 2 picks, one of them a pick 6. But he has played really well. In this game, he had a couple of good plays. He did get beat pretty deep. That didn't end up punishing him because of a weird A.J. Brown drop. But that's just kind of one big play. For the most part, he has played maybe not like a Pro Bowl cornerback, or at least I wouldn't put him in the Pro Bowl, but certainly that seems to be a conversation people are having based off the level of play that he's had this year. So that's something to consider. I would not have kept him based off of all the information we had at the time, but obviously I would keep him now. And he's saying that there's a difference in like the plays that they're calling and stuff like that that make him a better player with the Colts. It's a simpler defense. It's easier to react faster, and so it's not necessarily the case that he would play just as well in Minnesota. But I think that because the defense has been simplified in Minnesota, and I think it would still be simplified if Rhodes was kept on, that he would be playing pretty well for the Vikings this year. So that kind of sucks, but whatever. Trey Waynes, I believe, is missing the entire year due to injury. It really, really sucks. We had him on, or we didn't have him on. We had on a Bengals guy, or I was on a Bengals podcast. I don't remember anymore. We talked about Trey Waynes a little bit, and one of the things that I asked was like, hey, why hasn't he signed anywhere yet? Or not, why hasn't he signed with the Bengals yet? Like it was reported that he signed with the Bengals like way back at the beginning of free agency, and they never actually went through and signed him. And it was impeding his ability to practice because his agent didn't want him to practice without a deal in place in case he got injured. And so he signed a deal pretty late in the process. I think Wikipedia says it was in March, but from my understanding, it was actually pretty late in the process. And then he got a pectoral injury early September, and that put him on IR. I don't think that he's coming back. So there's that. Mackenzie Alexander, also a Bengal, I think to my eye is playing all right. Like he's playing like an average slot corner. PFF has him graded a little bit below that. They don't think that he's playing at an average level. They have him playing a little bit below an average level. He has given up 246 yards in coverage. And if I compare him to just a bunch of slot corners, let's see. Let's take a look. Slot corners, yards per snap in coverage, based off of 20% of however many whatever's. Yeah, okay. So he's given up the 16th most out of 45 cornerbacks in slot coverage. So I would say he's playing average. Some of the numbers would indicate that he's playing a little bit below average. So hopefully that answers the question. And then also Jaron Kearse, you saw him against the Lions. He is the third safety. He's not playing as much nickel as he did with the Vikings as a corner. And apparently, according to Lions people, he's playing all right for them. So the DBs are doing okay, except for the injuries. Xavier Rhodes is obviously he's playing really well. Not 2017 Rhodes, but certainly one of his better years in his career. So I don't know if that makes you feel any better. I imagine it doesn't, but that's the answer. I mean, I would have wanted to keep both Mackenzie Alexander and Jaron Kearse, but didn't really feel like they wanted to be in Minnesota.
And I think it's fair to say that Xavier Rhodes really did need a change of scenery.
That might be it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That could be pretty important.
Yeah. Swervin Shervin asks, there's a lot of fun and exciting receivers in the NFL right now. Has there ever been one with a bigger delta between their individual talent and the talents of their career quarterbacks than Allen Robinson? Just so you know, his college quarterbacks were McGloin and Hackenberg.
Yeah, that was an interesting question. It got us thinking, right? Because Robinson has just had an awful slate of quarterbacks, which does garner some sympathy, but also he did choose Chicago. Like he may not. I'm not going to blame a kid for choosing a college and that quarterback not working out. So that's fine. And then he got drafted, didn't have a choice there. So he had Bortles. That sucks. But then he did choose Chicago. So a lot of sympathy, but not like ultimate sympathy, right? Which is true for a lot of these receivers who've had long careers. So keep that in mind. But yeah, he has had just an absolutely awful slate of quarterbacks. We tried coming up with a list of receivers that qualified, and most of these receivers have had long enough careers where they have intersected with some fairly good quarterbacks. So it's not necessarily a great list, but The first one I wanted to bring up was Terry McLaurin, because he has had Dwayne Haskins his entire career.
That's just unfair.
It's brutal, absolutely brutal.
And we're not meaning his whole career as in professional. Oh no.
No, he had Dwayne Haskins in college too. And when he didn't have Dwayne Haskins, he had JT Barrett. So yeah, I mean, it just goes to show that you just can't trust Ohio State quarterbacks, what they do to Ohio State receivers. But besides McLaurin, we came up with a pretty good list. I think instinctively, Calvin Johnson and Larry Fitzgerald come to mind. I think especially if you've played fantasy, you always think, could do better with a better quarterback. Johnson obviously spent the bulk of his career with Matt Stafford, so it's not remotely comparable to Allen Robinson, but he did spend his college career with Reggie Ball, famously bad at quarterback in college. And for the beginning of Calvin Johnson's career, he had Orlovsky and John Kitna, and then Stafford got hurt a lot early in his career, so he also had Sean Hill, and he had bad Dante Culpepper, and he had Drew Stanton. So that's pretty bad, but he did have Stafford. Larry Fitzgerald did, of course, have a good version of Kurt Warner. He had a great version of Carson Palmer, but he had so many snaps with Tyler Palko in college, John Skelton, Kevin Cobb, Derek Anderson, Matt Leinart, Drew Stanton, Ryan Lindley in the NFL. So many.
Most of those quarterbacks were actually in one season, if I remember correctly.
Was it a Stanton, Lindley, Skelton season, I think.
There might
maybe
have been
Derek Anderson there too.
There might have been. I think Anderson was in there. Anderson might have started the season.
Yeah, I think Anderson. Yeah, because that's where the clip with Anderson, where they asked him why he was laughing on the sideline, which was just a stupid question. Because you're losing, but it's not like you can't laugh at a funny joke someone tells, right? But he was laughing on the sideline. The cameras caught it. The reporters asked him. And he's like, "What do you mean? I was never laughing. I don't laugh. I take this seriously, man."
I'd be like, all right, somebody want to break out their phone and YouTube real quick and just show him that he was giggling?
It was just, and he just went off on this rant about how serious this game is to him. And it's just like, man, you don't have to go this hard. You could just say, "Am I not allowed to laugh if someone tells a funny joke, dude? Is it going to make me better at football?"
Yeah,
come on.
That was a game where they were getting blown out. And
he was just like, come
being
on, man.
Judged. But Fitzgerald has always been in the conversation for somebody who's always deserved a better quarterback, and how people have always said, "Dude, just leave. You don't have to stay in Arizona.
Right, yeah.
There's options."
Yeah, you could have played with Minnesota Brett Favre. Come on, man. So there's that, and I think playing with Tyler Palko in college is a good indication, but he is disqualified for playing with Kurt Warner and Carson Palmer when they were having really great years. So I was trying to think of other players. The next one that came to mind, and we ended up looking up some other ones, but the one that came to mind for me was Stevie Johnson, known as the Darrelle Revis Destroyer. He was fantastic.
He was.
And so Stevie Johnson ended up having, in college, Andre Woodson, who had a very brief NFL career, wasn't that notable. But he had Ryan Fitzpatrick, and then he had the bad versions of Colin Kaepernick and Phillip Rivers. He didn't catch them in a good year, which really sucks. But yeah, Stevie Johnson, I think is one of the more underrated receivers from that era. I mean, he was just really phenomenal.
Yeah, and everyone was excited for him to get out of Buffalo. Everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. He could finally prove it. And then Phillip Rivers is in the middle of just this. I think it was the first year Phillip Rivers ended up having back issues. And so he just couldn't throw. That was the worst adjusted net yards per attempt Phillip Rivers has had in his career, except for 2012 and his rookie season. So it was just awful stuff. And then he got Colin Kaepernick in 2014, which was not the worst Colin Kaepernick. That was 2015, 2016, but it was also not good Colin Kaepernick, which was 2012, 2013. It was just rough for him. I feel for him. So that I think is the most obvious. And then we kind of looked it up. We looked around. We want to see other lists to make sure that we got everybody. And two names stuck out. First is Andre Johnson. And I don't know if I wanted to include him because he did get a couple of good years of Matt Schaub, but he also had a lot of bad years of Matt Schaub. He had David Carr. He had Sage Rosenfels. Sorry, Sage. Love you, but You're not good at Houston. Case Keenum, again, not good. Case Keenum, and then of course Fitz, and then in college it's tough, right? Because he was with the 2002 Miami Hurricanes, and there's only so much sympathy you can have for somebody playing on the best college team of all time. But Ken Dorsey was not like a great quarterback, so if it's just quarterbacks, I mean, maybe you could put him on the list. And then Lee Evans popped up, and Lee Evans was really good. So I was trying to look up who he played for. J.P. Lossman, Trent Edwards, Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's now appeared on this list 3 times, Drew Bledsoe, Kelly Holcomb. And this is like, late career Drew Bledsoe. I think he may have made one Pro Bowl with Lee Evans, but for the most part, he was really bad. Kelly Holcomb, and then the average version of Joe Flacco. So not the awful version, I don't know if there was ever a great version, but not the best of Joe Flacco either. And then in college, he was at Wisconsin, so pre-Russell Wilson Wisconsin, so he didn't have any good players. But a couple of ones actually made it to the NFL. Brooks Bollinger, Jim Sorge, and somebody named Matt Shabert, which sounds like a fake name. And he doesn't have a Wikipedia page, so that lends credence to that.
There's a lot of wasted talent on this list.
Yeah. Oh, and Jimmy Smith, who I think has a Hall of Fame career, but Mark Brunell, David Garrard, Byron Leftwich, Jay Fiedler, and whoever the quarterback at Jackson State was.
Jeez. Eli asks, who is the Bears' weakest link on each side of the ball? Is there a guy to blitz over and over, or a guy to run or throw to repeatedly? And who might that be?
Yeah, so I didn't ask this question specifically of Lauren, but I think based off of his answers, I'd say on offense, it's everybody. Except the receivers. Lauren was not super optimistic about the nature of that offense. I think you got that by the end of the interview. But if there was somebody specifically, you'd have to find out who is healthy on that offensive line. Because if it's a less healthy version of that offensive line, then it's probably that 7th round pick with a really excellent name. Arlington Hambright, I want to say, is probably the guy. Otherwise, it's probably Alex Bars. Defense, so that's the guy to pressure and blitz over and over. Defensively, it looks like it's Buster Skrine because though they're not getting a ton of production out of the other edge position with Robert Quinn, it's still like reasonable, right? But Buster Skrine is an average to below average nickel who is being supported on the boundaries by Kyle Fuller and Jalen Johnson, who are both having good years. So Buster Skrine's the guy you want to target, which it turns out is easy, right? Because he's the nickel corner. And so if you just go 3 wide, which the Vikings have been doing less and less and less of, but if you just go 3 wide and put Adam Thielen in the slot or Justin Jefferson in the slot, you've got a really good matchup for you. So that's something to consider.
Next question is from Kyle Slaby, who asks, how does Matt Patricia still have a job? I was certain defeat last week would have done him in.
I mean, maybe, but the thing is now people are thinking of the Vikings as potentially good. And so it's not embarrassing anymore like it was for BOB. Like if it's a team's first win of the season and you're struggling, 4 team versus a 0-4 team, that's easy firing territory. But it's like, oh, you lost to a team that by the end of the year people might consider good. Who knows? So maybe that's the reason. I don't know. I mean, I feel like Matt Patricia should have been fired before the year started, right? So if he's not fired at this point, he's got a pretty long leash.
I feel like if he makes it to like February, he's fine. Like he makes it like through the end of the year and isn't one of the 4 or 5 coaches that's fired the day after the season ends.
If he makes it past early January, yeah, he's fine. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I'm not saying he will be. I'm just saying that it seems like the odds of him surviving are high if he makes it past those first couple of days when all the bodies are stacked up for those that are fired. Yeah. Delta BC Dad asks, it's cute that you keep mentioning that Norse Code can't afford to make deep fakes of Dusty when we all know that's not the only option. Doppelgangers are real. How long has Melissa been impersonating Avril for? We're on to you, quote unquote, James. Dusty, if you can hear us, and I assume you can since, quote, James uses this show to torment you, don't give up hope. I am still looking for you. I will be hot on the trail once the border reopens again. I don't know how to feel about that.
Delta BC Dad is from Canada and I assume from BC, British Columbia.
Correct.
But okay, so first of all, we don't have the funding to hire an actor either, right? Like Melissa impersonates Avril because it gets you Avril money, which I mean, I guess that doesn't sound amazing, but it's quite a bit more than we make, right?
It's more than Dusty money.
You're right. Yeah. So like Melissa has an incentive to keep up this deception. What are we gonna get? The only Dusty doppelganger I can think of is Hank Green, and there's no way we can afford Hank Green. That dude clearly makes more money than we would have the ability to pay him.
Yeah, he doesn't work in spats of Tree Fitty.
Yeah, so I don't think we can hire a doppelganger. But you're right that is probably cheaper than deep fakes. I don't know, but especially for like an entire podcast. But no, clearly the show does not have a means of impersonating Dusty.
No, I actually have a doppelganger, and it's weird. And I don't suggest people have it. It's really off-putting.
Well, anytime a brown bald dude with a beard shows up on TV, I get a million ads. So I guess I have a ton of doppelgangers.
I suppose so. I'm in a slightly different sense in that I have this, I have this height, I have this frame, I have this like look to me, and I have my the way I speak. And there's a fellow that I knew in town that had a very similar to all of that. And of course, somebody like that worked the midnight shift at Walmart. So you would see him every once in a while, and I would be disturbed at the fact that I had a doppelganger over there. And it turns out I actually discovered recently that I'm related to him at like a great-grandfather level. And
is that far enough away for us to say that doesn't count as a doppelganger? I think great-grandfather, it is far enough away, yeah.
Yeah, I think that I think great-grandfather and great-grandmother count.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was weird. Discovering that. I'm not even in like all that into genealogy, but when I discovered that, I was like, wow, that I don't know how to feel about that actually. That I guess that answers the question as to why I have a doppelganger. Also, also from Delta BC Dad, the discussion about the value of running backs was really interesting last episode. With Dalvin and the last two games, I think we really have to remember that by chance, sometimes you could get two really exceptional games back to back before regressing to the mean. Humans are generally really bad at understanding these sorts of non-linear dynamics, so they just see two exceptional games, and they have short memories, and it resets their priors really quickly. That said, it might be interesting to know how often a running back had two really exceptional games back-to-back like that, and then how that correlates to how they did over the rest of the season. Did they regress back to their old mean, or does two really excellent games actually reasonably affect our priors? I think he will regress to the mean, and that is just, sampling variation.
Yes, this is a really interesting question. I unfortunately don't think I have the tools at the moment to really test out this hypothesis and answer it in full on the podcast. But if he has another really great game, I'm probably just going to write that piece for The Athletic. I'm going to see if I can find a way to get those tools and find like who has, over 600 total yards over 3 games or something like that. Or I guess 700, right? Because he's already pretty close to hitting 500. And so that would just be a 100-yard game. I think that this is a really worthwhile question. But I think that, yes, for the most part, these players do regress to their mean. We do have to remember that 2012 Peterson is a really good example of a player that strung together like 6 phenomenal games, 1 okay game, and then an 8th phenomenal game in the back half of the 2012 season. Like the first game of 2013 was really great because it started off with that 80-yard run, and then it was just kind of whatever after that. This is something that I'm going to explore if he ends up having another really great game, because it'll allow us to really kind of evaluate I think, more faithfully this question, because 3 games is difficult to string together by chance. I say difficult as if there's like some sort of effort, and then I said the word chance, but you know what I mean. It's pretty rare. So that I'm going to investigate. Obviously, probably every 2,000-yard season has had that, but that's backwards looking, and we want to be forwards looking and see every game with 3 of these types of samples, probably 700 yards total over the course of 3 games, and then try and see kind of what we're getting out of that. So that'll be kind of fascinating. We'll have to adjust for things like touches, right? Because if you end up with 90 touches over 700 yards, it's just like, oh, okay, you had 30 touches a game, fine. But if it ends up being kind of like Dalvin Cook's average is pretty high over the course of these 3 games, if it ends up being closer to 60 touches, that becomes a much more interesting question. So, I can't answer this right now. I can come up with a couple of examples just because they are the 2,000-yard seasons, but that doesn't give us the whole sample. That just tells us that it can happen, which is not a useful answer to this question. But I think that you're right that it's kind of a problem with human cognition. Humans are kind of wired to see patterns, and if patterns start after 2, that's sort of a thing. I don't want to just kind of brush off the people that are saying that Dalvin Cook is demonstrating that he's worth his contract at the moment, because I did say after the first of these 200-yard games that thus far this year, based not just off of that game, but off of the year that he's had thus far, that he is justifying the contract. So I don't want to brush those people off or anything like that, but that's something to consider. And again, last episode, I also mentioned that I was able to get Stats by Lopez to simulate a bunch of random plays for a bunch of running backs to see if we can replicate a type of season that Dalvin Cook is having. And over the course of 200 carries, we can. But over the course of like 800 carries, we cannot. That tends to even out. And so really high-level performances over multiple years, which one could argue Dalvin Cook is having. I don't know about, this level of high performance, but that is difficult to replicate. And I really like that because it kind of reels us back in from the analytics community's, I don't want to say initial findings, but kind of first order findings on this running back stuff. Because if we can find countervailing data to it that matches our intuitive expectations, that is probably good.
All right. Next question is from Mike, who asks, is this a make or break game for the playoffs? Just how many times in a season can this team break your heart? I feel like at this point, every game is a make or break game if you're actually trying to make a run. So in order to not get this question every week, can we just say, yes, this is a make or break game?
So I think actually the Vikings are allowed 2 losses from here on out, right? Because they got 5. I think a 9-7 team makes it as the 7th seed. So in one sense, it's not, because they're allowed about 2 losses. But in another sense, so is it a make or break mathematically? Not really. Is it a make or break in terms of the way that we view the team? Probably, right? Because like a 3-6 team doesn't make the playoffs very often. We could take a look at Justice's chart. I don't want to pull it up right now, but it doesn't feel like a team that should make the playoffs. And I don't know if it sends the Vikings into a mode where they start thinking of it differently. I would suspect not, based off of how they responded to 1 and 5. But it wouldn't feel like, so it would be make or break in terms of our perceptions about their ability to make the playoffs. And in order to kind of regain our trust, they probably have to rattle off 3 in a row, which again, based off their schedule, certainly possible. But mathematically, technically, no. But it's tough for us to say that, well, you can take this loss, but you'll only get 1 more after that. Like, how are you going to trust the team that's 3-6 to only take 1 more loss for the rest of the season? I don't know. But yeah, this has happened. Not very often, but it's happened where teams make the playoffs after a 3-6 record. Just, it's not super common. So make or break in some senses, but not in others, which I know is a super useful answer.
Yeah. Andrew Shad asks, Minnesota offense versus Chicago defense is going to be a slugfest, and Chicago probably has the edge. Chicago offense versus Minnesota defense is a mess on both sides. Who has the edge in the battle of suck and why? Nagy is clever, but I could see his, quote, perfect schemes going either way in against Zimmer this year.
Yeah, Nagy really pulled one up over Zim's eyes 1 year, 2 years ago, right? Well, I guess also last year, but I mean that was just the Vikings were just playing poorly.
This is
Um,
Nagy has a history of
yeah,
outsmarting Mike Zimmer.
yeah, it must have been 2 years ago because I remember Mike Zimmer saying, "Yeah, their playbook is like 300 pages long. It's so crazy. It's so effective that they've got such a deep playbook." And then like in the very next question, we asked about John DeFilippo, and he's like, "Yeah, he's just got to have a smaller playbook. I don't know what this guy is doing." I remember that now, so that must have been a couple of years ago. But yeah, Nagy's got a pretty decent history against Zimmer. Some of that might just have to do with the Soldier Field thing, but yeah, who's got that edge? I would say on paper, probably the Vikings. When I essentially asked a version of this question to Lauren, I mean, he is just so down on that offensive line unit. That even after I'd listed off who the defensive linemen were, I mean, you heard him. He was like, yeah, I mean, Tennessee fans said the same thing, and then they had a career performance, so who knows? But yeah, I think that the Vikings are probably the better defense. And then if you take a look at how many expected points per play the defense has given up since week 3, which I know I get to choose my endpoints. It's an arbitrary endpoint, but if I picked week 4, week 5, or week 6, it actually looked pretty similar. Actually, if I picked week 4, it looks a little bit worse. But since week 3, the Vikings are 10th best in expected points allowed per play, this does not feel like a top 10 defense, certainly, but they are preventing deep throws. Like teams just don't want to throw deep against the Vikings, it seems like. We only saw one from Matt Stafford. We saw, I guess, one from Chase Daniel, but it was kind of a late in the game, didn't matter, turned out to be a pick anyway, sort of deep ball. Yeah, teams just kind of don't want to throw deep against the Vikings. And so that is a pretty decent indication that they've been able to keep kind of things in front of them. Their red zone defense is shockingly reliable, and they've been able to keep teams out of the end zone. So I think that favors the Minnesota defense, which, I mean, you're right. I think the Chicago defense has the upper hand against the Minnesota offense, although, in the interest of full disclosure, if you do the same thing since week 3, and I exclude garbage time for both of these, if you do the same thing since week 3, the offense is like second in expected points created overall, which just that doesn't feel accurate, does it, James?
No.
Yeah.
Because we've watched this team this year.
Right. Like there's no way it's the second best offense in the NFL. But it can be pretty remarkably efficient. So that's something to keep in mind. But I agree that Chicago's defense probably has an edge. The Vikings offensive line is finding ways to play better, it's seemingly, from week to week. So that's something to keep in mind, but I don't know that Akeem Hicks and Khalil Mack can be stopped by an improving offensive line, right? Like there's maybe 3 offensive lines in the league I would expect to be able to kind of handle that kind of pressure. And the Vikings are clearly not one of them. So, which I think would probably be the Bucks, Browns, and Packers. But I think in the battle of suck, the Minnesota defense comes out ahead.
Boy, can you imagine what sort of numbers this team would be putting up if they hadn't pooped the bed the first 4 or 5 weeks of the year?
I mean, yeah. I mean, if they had a preseason, and I don't want to say this as an excuse. I want to say it as an explanation, right? Because it's not like the Vikings deserve the losses on their schedule for not being able to prepare as well as other teams do. So I want to say that. But in an alternate universe, right, where they maybe have had a preseason, maybe this gets worked out. I do want to say I am kind of annoyed, though, because this was like a lot of this was easy to foresee. So Mike Zimmer has said over the past 3 or 4 weeks that he has significantly simplified the defense, and he has found ways to protect the corners and not ask them to do so much, both in terms of the things that they're required to process as corners and things that they're required to like physically do on the field, right? And as an explanation why the defense is doing better. And I asked him like 5 or 6 times this offseason, hey, this is a young cornerback group. And after a while, I'd also added, they seem to be struggling because they were struggling in camp and then they were struggling in actual games. They seem to be struggling. have you considered simplifying the defense? Yeah, I asked him this back when we had the first availability in spring over Zoom, and then I asked him this again in late spring, early summer, or no, in summer, and then in the fall. So not actually in spring, but I asked him like twice in the off season, then a couple of times in training camp, then during the regular season. I don't know football better than Mike Zimmer or anything like that, obviously, right? But like, if a dummy like me can see that was probably the solution, I'm just shocked that Zimmer wasn't able to figure this out until like 6 weeks into the season. So it was foreseeable. But yeah, if they had gotten their stuff together by, and had a preseason and fixed things, we'd probably be talking about a team that is not competing for the title of the NFC, but is certainly competing for, I guess not a top 4 seed, right? Because you still have the Packers, but competing for essentially the 5th seed, the top of the wild cards. And people would be talking about it as potentially a dark horse for the playoffs. But that's not what happened, and they've been bad. They've been better, but they started out pretty bad.
Anton asks, after the boys in purple yet again have gotten our hopes up, and Ace Ventura having established the link between Chicago and shish kebab, what do we eat when we see Bailey kicking a field goal to put our first points up in the fourth quarter?
That's interesting. I did not really think about this question.
I just made the realization that this is the Monday night game, and so that we're going to be recording immediately afterwards.
Yeah,
we don't do live reactions very, very often. So,
no, we do not.
Boy, what do you eat at that point? I think you should take out your Dots pretzels at that point and just go to town on as many carbs as you can.
Would you want it to be very Chicago-y? I don't know that you do.
No, it's different when it's a Wisconsin thing, when it's a cheese thing. But I mean, what are you gonna do? Just start mowing down on Jardinera? Like,
right? Just get an Italian beef going.
I'm just gonna throw.
It's not like you can order like a deep dish pizza 40 minutes before the like last second field goal, right?
I'm gonna launch a deep dish pizza across the room, like watch it slowly trail down due to all of the sauce, like
right. No, I think you just go basic. The Dots pretzels are good.
Yeah, just straight Dots. That would be my suggestion. Logan asks, everyone knows nothing is more sacred to Arif than his takes. If a Christmas Carol situation happened, which 3 takes would it be? My guess. The past is turkey is trash, and he sees someone at a post-Thanksgiving hurt by his comments. Present, Trubisky can't throw left, and he sees Mitch missing the holidays because he's practicing.
Oh.
Future, running backs don't matter, and he finds himself alone and angry on Twitter arguing this isn't even as Zeke, Cook, McCaffrey, and Saquon rack up MVPs and Super Bowl rings for 10 years straight.
Well, first of all, if Ghost of Christmas Future like shows, or Ghost of Takesmas Future, I suppose, shows up and tells me like that my take is wrong and will be definitively proven wrong over the course of the next decade, I would immediately switch up my take. I want to be right. It's not, the point isn't that I make a take and I want to defend it because the take is attached to me. No, I want to defend it because I like being right. And so if a Ghost of Takesmas Future shows up and tells me that what the true take is and will be for the next decade, that's my take. I'm cheating, obviously. So I'm immediately changing the take. No question about it. There's no principles when it comes to hot takes. That erodes the whole point.
Yeah, you'd much rather, your willingness to be stubborn is not as large as your desire to be right.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's you've nailed it. As for kind of the rest, like what 3 takes would it be? So I think the most shameful food takes are not turkey is trash. That one actually has a fair amount of support. It's the candy corn is good, but I always have to specify not the store-bought candy corn, the homemade candy corn, which makes it essentially untestable, except for the people that actually received the candy corn. I say actually because I didn't get to everybody, but actually received the candy corn that I sent out. But most people who are like, oh, Arif might have a point about homemade candy corn versus store-bought candy corn, they're not going to like make it. So it's essentially an untestable take. But that one gets a lot of hate. And then obviously the Totino's Pizza one.
I just had, inspired by you, I found myself at the grocery store the other day and it was like 3 for $5. And I went, well, I have an army. Let's do this.
How was it received?
Oh, well, they ate it. And then I read the realization that I needed something to eat as well. And like, well, I'll have a piece. And boy, has it managed to get worse since college. I felt the need to message you immediately, but I decided against it. To curse you out over your recommendation or your love of.
Definitely the ghost of Takes Past is Totino's Pizza is good, and I see someone eating a Totino's Pizza and getting angry at it.
Probably
that's
me.
fair. Although I did also say that this is an indefensible take and I will not defend it.
Well,
so
yes.
In my defense,
this isn't. I can't remember if it was Drew Mulholland or if it was somebody else who died on the hill of Little Caesars as their brand.
Oh yeah. Because I mean, his argument is that like pizza is essentially all the same, and Little Caesars is the cheapest, which I can't. No, that's incorrect.
That is a line too far. But kudos to him for making it his brand.
Yeah, no, that's something. Yeah, and then let's see, what's the Ghost of Takesmas present? Because there's the Carson Wentz's bad take, which man did that look bad in 2017, but has looked really phenomenal otherwise.
It had a blip. There was a blip of it.
Yeah.
And then it corrected
It was to keep me humble. I understand it.
Really? That's that's like the guy who blames his says, I had a drinking problem for a little bit there and everything, but that was really just to keep me humble. That was really just to make it so I appreciated what I had.
Yeah, no, it's important to remind me that I can be wrong.
You monster. That is so terrible.
I can't believe I said that. But it's probably the Carson one. And he's probably, the ghost is showing me Carson texting various members of Philly media. Like, do you know him? Why does he hate me so much? That I think would be good. But yeah, future, if it's not running backs don't matter, and that again is fairly popular. It might have to be, I'm probably going to have to start going in on Trey Lance this offseason. And so that's a future take that I have yet to have developed, right? So that's even better, I think, for this use case, is that Trey Lance is a bad quarterback. It's not a take I have now because I'll have to have watched him, and I haven't. But I know that I'm going to think that because he plays for NDSU. So the Ghost of Takesmas Future is going to show me Trey Lance. And in the spirit of this conversation, the Ghost would then show me that Trey Lance ends up turning out to be an MVP quality quarterback. But because he's shown me, I will change my take and be shameless about it. And I'll probably put down some money because if the Ghost is showing me the future, I'm totally profiting off of it. Are you kidding me?
It would be wrong not to profit off of a ghost.
Yeah, it would be wrong not to. There was this show where the guy got the next day's newspaper or something like that.
Yeah, he
like,
got it the day
called
before,
Morning
yeah.
Edition or something. Yeah, early edition, I think was it. And he refused, and he like showed two of his friends, and that's it. And he kept it secret otherwise. And he would go about like saving people's lives based off of what was happening in the news. And he like refused to profit off of it. And his friend it drove his friend up the wall. And I would be that friend. Because he's spending a lot of his day saving people's lives and he's getting no compensation for it.
Well, no, at that point he has the Blues Brothers mission from God thing going for him. So if you're getting that whole thing, you don't want to tempt fate. Meanwhile,
he's got to eat, right?
yeah. Meanwhile, you would have no ethics problems at all, being like, let me just check the sports section here real quick. Has anyone ever made a 16-team parlay? Let me see what I can do here.
Yeah, and it's not like who's the victim here? Casinos? Cry me a river.
I was about to say a deity, but
well, I would probably have to believe in a deity if I got the next day's newspaper.
I think that, yeah.
I would also have to learn to wake up in the morning because, man, can you imagine waking up at like 2 p.m., getting the next day's newspaper and seeing like you could have saved somebody's life, but it was like a noon event?
Be like, oh no, I overslept due to that article that, God, people are just going to argue in the comments over. Oh no. Nolan asks, question for Arif's career change corner. Given Kirk is clearly out to not only usurp my happiness, but also my livelihood as a singer, what other lines of work might I consider? Perhaps I could try to take his Pizza Ranch spokesmanship if I could ever get over the border. For those who are unaware, a video resurfaced this week of Kirk Cousins that was his singing, and that was a choir situation, right?
I presume it was high school and he was doing like random musicals and choirs.
Yeah, so that's been a thing this week on Twitter, and if you missed it, God bless you. Just so jealous. So incredibly jealous.
What other lines of work would an otherwise happy singer? You're a happy artist? Well, I mean, your career's doomed, right? I mean, what else could Nolan do? I mean, he could probably get the next day's newspaper and start saving lives. And apparently it's enough to pay the bills.
Do they have newspapers in Canada?
That's a good question. It's such a foreign land. I have no idea.
I haven't been in what feels like forever now. It's been a bit since my last trip up to Canada to I want to say Banff. I think that was the last time. I've been to Canada drunk on a bet before, because that's what you do, shortly after you graduate high school. But
yeah, it's fairly North Dakota, yeah.
That is really pure North Dakota. Like, what are you crossing the border for? I live in Grand Forks and I'm 19. I'm bored as hell. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Just I can drink up there, right? Oh yeah, sure. Come on up.
Yeah, just don't drive and don't hurt anybody don't hurt anybody shooting the loonies at anybody. All right, just be careful. Devil Flanders asks, I miss single bar face masks. What is your favorite banned or out of style NFL gear?
So my answer to this is the neck roll, which, I mean, it would obviously be Matthew Collar's answer, but I think the neck roll is hilarious. There's not really a clear benefit to having it. I think Leighton Vander Esch is the only one who has it in the NFL, but it's like a very fullback sort of thing where you've got a giant piece of plastic and foam sticking out your back. I don't know. It looks weird and tough and pointless, so I love it. But probably the neck roll. If not the neck roll, the shoe that Tom Dempsey got to wear for not having toes.
Oh God, yeah. Jeez, I forgot about that one. Yeah, the neck roll is great because it kind of signified something, or like, you were in it. You were like,
yeah, right. You were pure football.
Yeah, you were prepared, man. And you were prepared for your safety because you had that thing that looked like it was going to help. Like, you used to see it a fair amount a couple of years ago, but and especially in the college ranks as well. But that went away quickly. You know what I miss? I miss Odell Beckham's watch. I miss watching somebody run up and down the field wearing a $350,000 watch for no good reason. It was so incredibly stupid. And I like the idea that he could have potentially just forgot to do it. Obviously he didn't. He wore it intentionally, but like, oh no, this is just as much like, this is just me showing off as much as humanly possible for this. Either Odell's watch or Antonio Brown's helmet really just seems like
that counts both as out of style and banned.
Exactly. So that works for me. Don from Ohio has the final two questions. He goes, how excited am I for Monday night's football game that's going to be Kyle Sloter's revenge game? Can you really have a revenge game if you're on the practice squad?
Well, I mean, there is a chance that he gets called up because of Mitch Trubisky's shoulder injury. So that could happen. Tyler Bray could get called up instead. Obviously, it would make way more sense to pull up Kyle Sloter because he doesn't know the playbook yet. He just got signed very recently. And we all know he does a lot better if he's not being told what to do. So, that's an opportunity. It's pretty unlikely, I would say.
Sloter is his own man, yeah.
Yeah, but we'll see.
Also from Don, dear gentlemen, today this isn't a smoking question this time, as it turns out. He must have given up. That's that is too bad. Perhaps he'll just go back to the charcoal grill his girlfriend likes.
He's going to the indoor oven instead of the outdoor oven.
Oh yeah, dear gentlemen, today I am picking up my girlfriend's 28-foot camper gifted to her by her late uncle. This is the first time I will ever be driving a truck with a camper attached to it of any size. For added support, I have decided to wear your Norse Code t-shirt. This is true. That was verified via a picture he had posted on Twitter.
I am worried about the damage to our brand that this will cause.
Yeah, well, here we are. What result do you see happening? 1, I drive home safely the whole 35 miles. 2, I drive it safely for 20 miles, and then the truck tanks on me. Number 3, the camper is destroyed on the way home. Number 4, the truck and camper are destroyed and girlfriend collects on my life insurance. If you already have her listed as the beneficiary of your life insurance and she's just your girlfriend, you should just get over whatever fear it is you have of engagement or wedding and just get over with it. Just do it.
It's turned into James's relationship corner.
Yeah, if you already in a situation where she can collect on your death, you should probably just go to the judge at this point. That's
so I was leaning for number 2, drive it safely for 20 miles, and the truck tanks on me. But then so who responded with number 5, which was you drive it home safely the whole time, but then it comes time to back it up and it ruins your relationship.
Yeah, that actually seemed really likely.
Yeah, that one I think is top notch. That one's pretty phenomenal.
That's a bit like the Friends episode where they're trying to move the couch and Topwise becomes a way of describing something.
Yeah, right.
That's pretty good. I was thinking for a moment about the potential options, and then I saw the Facebook video of the 30 vehicle pileup outside of Monticello today, with multiple vehicles on fire, and for whatever reason I thought of Don.
Jesus Christ.
And his camper situation. And I don't know that he's necessarily going to cause it. But
how many vehicles are involved in Don's pileup?
Oh, that's there's a good way to figure this out.
What?
There's an excellent way to figure this out. Oh, okay. Well, see, what I was going to do was I was going to Google what Kyle Sloter's number was. But it turns out it's 1. So that doesn't really help me. That's too bad.
Yeah, 1 car pileup.
Yeah, 1 car pileup.
Who else does Don stand for? There's probably some tight end that he's been wild about.
Well, he is particularly fond of the Ohio State football team.
All right, so
like how many people can fit into that stadium is going to be the number of vehicles that are involved in this crash. There, perfect. There
you go.
That's like 102,000. That's you may not intentionally go down in history, but you will be an answer on the for the next host of Jeopardy. So enjoy that. That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. I hope you enjoyed it. Arif, where can they find your work?
Yeah, you can find me at The Athletic, theathletic.com/author/Arif-Hassan, or you can find me on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I was on like 19 Bears podcasts today, so you could probably find me on basically any Bears podcast, I guess. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Oh, and I also got if you didn't catch it, a new episode of Wide Left, my thoughts on the election. So head over to @WideLeftPodcast.
I was also going to say there was a question earlier, I believe it was the last episode or the episode before, asking about the Noam Chomsky interview, and I believe I just saw that posted.
Oh, yeah. The Noam Chomsky interview is out now, but it's mostly, I think it's a Patreon exclusive. I don't know. Head over to Habibti Please, which I think also has a Substack. I'll link that in the show notes as well. But yeah, there's an interview I did with Noam Chomsky.
All right, well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Please join us on Monday night for our live post-game reaction to whatever the heck is going to happen in Chicago. So for Arif, my name is James. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much for listening, and please remember that all things are possible through the work of Ben DiNucci. And we will be back next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's official Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can also find his written work at theathletic.com. I am your podcast host and producer, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can make a recurring monthly contribution by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. A donation of $3.50 per month does get you bonus material from the show and much more. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.